we're looking at the kind of esoteric philosophy of, firstly, Greece, which is something that I've always been interested in. I suppose it's why I became a philosopher, really, was discovering ancient Greek philosophy. And it was never really taught in school. It was, you just didn't really hear about it. Although we did Latin, and I went to a grammar school in Sussex. And there was some kind of rumours there was this ancient thing called classical civilization, but nobody really explained what it was about. Until I started studying philosophy at university. And I did an ancient history A-level, which opened my eyes to it a bit. But even then, there was no real talk about esoteric philosophy or about religious philosophy. That is something that only specialist classical scholars and experts in ancient philosophy will study. When I was at London University, there's a chap called Sarabji, who's one of the world's leading experts on Aristotelian philosophy. And, people like him know about the kind of stuff I'm going to be talking about today. But it's not... even here in this school, although we do Latin and Greek, we teach it just as a language. And I had to do a cover lesson the other day for a Latin language class. And I thought there was no work set, so I gave them a little quick overview of Roman religion, Latin philosophy and religion. And they said they'd never been taught that and knew nothing about it, and how interesting they found it. So I think that's just rather sad that we deprive our students of actually understanding how interesting classical civilization is, even in schools where it's still on the curriculum. So, right, well, how far back does it go? You've got the map there. The thing about Greece is that that's a Latin word for it. It was called Hellas, which is the Greek word for it. And it's a miracle, really, that it happened. In previous talks, I've stressed the importance of the Middle East and the invention of the alphabet, and a lot of urban achievements came from the Middle East. Well, on a bigger map of the world than Europe, Greece is our closest entry point to the Middle East. So the miracle, if you want, of Greek civilization can be explained geographically by reference to the fact that it's the portal it's the very southeastern tip of Europe, and this archipelago of islands goes straight up to the coast of Anatolia in Turkey, as you've got on your map there, which is technically where Asia begins. And also, round the corner of Turkey, which I flew over last August and was very mindful of this, is the great island of Cyprus, which is also Greek-speaking, although now obviously half Turkish-speaking. But you've also got Crete there, another great island off the south part of the Aegean Sea. And so these centres of European civilization were the first to receive the waves of learning that came from the Middle East. And there's very strong links between the cultures of the Mesopotamian region and Syria and the Phoenician coasts and so on with Greece. So as you'd expect, there's links with their religions. Now, what the basic sort of core religious beliefs of the Greeks was obviously in their pantheon of gods, and the Greek word for that is theoi, the gods. They believed that there was a kind of pantheon of gods, not just one. And this is one of the central things that distinguishes later Christian and Jewish and Islamic philosophy from that of the Greek Hellenistic worldview. I sometimes always say to students that it's a more generous kind of view of the world. Instead of there being disputes and squabbles over whose God is the real God, the one only God, we've got this ridiculous situation where several one only gods end up fighting their respective followers. Ours is the only God. The Greek mind was totally anathema to all that. There's a plurality of gods, which is the only way to solve the complexity of human nature and human geographical experience. The Greeks were great travellers, great sailors. They'd explored all the different parts of the Mediterranean before about 800 BC. And they'd encountered civilizations and cultures with all different kinds of understandings of God and the gods. There were peoples in the Black Sea region, where the Greeks also got to. You've got the very beginnings of the Black Sea, top right-hand corner, through the Propontis, the great sea there, and then on into the Black Sea. Now, in the golden age of Greek legends, Jason and the Argonauts sailed across the Black Sea all the way to the furthest coast where they found the Golden Fleece. Jason got about because he also founded Ljubljana in Slovenia, which is right over the other side, north of the Balkans. I discovered when I was there last summer that he was the founder of the city, by legend, right, on the voyage with the Argonauts. But the Greeks also got right through the Mediterranean as far as Spain and southern France, and explored the whole of that kind of world as well, and indeed settled colonies in Sicily and southern Italy quite early on, as well as down the coasts of Anatolia itself. So all these cities down here are very important in the history of Greek thought. Miletus, which is down in Caria, bottom right-hand corner of the map. Halicarnassus, another very important city. The island of Kos, just off there, which is where Hippocrates, the founder of Greek medicine, came from. And you've got Samos, the big island off the coast of Caria, where Pythagoras came from. Lesbos, higher, where Sappho, great Greek female poetess, came from. And then, of course, north of that is Troy. So the time epoch that we're looking at, really, for the beginnings of Greek religion is very early. And in fact, we can trace it back to Minoan culture, partly. I've got a handout I'll give you about Minoans, which is more to do with archaeology. You can have it anyway, because it's interesting. I photocopied this from a kind of historical encyclopedia. It tells you about Minoan culture. Has anyone been to Crete? Yeah? It's where Knossos is. If you... it's the palaces that were discovered by Leonard Woolley and Arthur Evans, I think, have central points for religious worship. They've got a very developed art. If you look at the frescoes of these priestesses with long hair, with coils in the hair. And they were using a script. They had writing from very early on, from about at least 1500 BC. Okay? Turn over the page and there's the famous statuette of a Cretan priestess dancing, holding snakes, with a bird on her head. It was a kind of religion that obviously looked at nature as sacred and divine. The Greek goddess Hera seems to have come from Crete. She was the queen of the heavens and the queen of the gods. And female deities were as powerful as the male. It's thought that when Mycenaean culture invaded Crete, they imposed a kind of more patriarchal view of the gods onto the pre-existing cultures, which had been more feminine-oriented. And basically, the deity of the Mycenaean Greeks was called Zeus, or Zeus. It just means God, but in the sense of light. So the god of the sky, the god of light. So what they did, rather than kind of fight it out as to who was preeminent deity, they simply married them off, which is a way of postponing the battle and dragging it out over many years. So Hera and Zeus became the divine couple that rule in heaven, and that was conceptualized as being on Mount Olympus, up in the north of Greece. and their offspring then people the world. The Greek cosmology was very complex, and their religious teachings go back to the time of Homer,